great interest in your. Can I ask Janet, Secretary Yellen, how would you characterize now? And you've been very, very straightforward in your views and everything. How would you characterize the health of the economy now?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I think I would say let's first look back at the trajectory of the economy over the last 18 months. During that period, the United States has experienced an historic economic recovery. There were 9 million jobs created, over 9 million last year, and we saw the fastest single-year decline in unemployment in our historic record. And I think at the core, this rebound has really reflected the administration's policies, especially the rescue plan and the timely fiscal support it provided, along with vaccination efforts that allowed our businesses to reopen and let Americans get back to work. Right now, there are an enormous set of global headwinds, including a war in Europe and successive variants of the pandemic, but our economy remains resilient. So we're clear-eyed about the challenges we face now and in the future, which have especially been driven by global factors like Russia's illegal war in Ukraine, the lingering effects of the pandemic with lockdowns in places like China. Growth is slowing around the world. Inflation remains unacceptably high. And of course, it's your overriding objective, our administration's top priority, to bring it down. As you said, Mr. President, we're at a transitional moment in our economy. We're focusing on moving from a period of rapid recovery that we enjoyed over the last 18 months to now achieving steady, sustainable growth, but without sacrificing the gains we've made. And, you know, economists should look holistically, I think, at data when we evaluate the state of the economy. And we can see, for example, from today's GDP report, that growth in private demand has slowed. That does indicate an economy that is transitioning to more steady and sustainable growth. But job creation is continuing. Household finances, as we've discussed and Brian discussed, household finances remain robust. Consumers are spending. And I believe that in the months to come, with skill and luck, it will be possible to maintain that strength, particularly the strength we enjoy in the labor market, while easing the tightness that has been driving inflation.
Well, you know, there's an old expression, a baseball coach of the Dodgers years ago, Leo DeRocha, said, "I'd rather have Lady Luck sitting on my bench than skill." My grandfather was an All-American football player at Santa Clara in the turn of the century. You say, no, I'd rather have luck and skill on the bench. So we're looking for both. Let me just say before I yield to you, Brian, and we can move on to the rest of the folks here. It's interesting and totally understandable why the vast majority of the American people have no idea what the recovery plan did, what the government did at all. I mean, the reason why we still had teachers in school, kids going to school, the reason why we had cops on the beat, the reason why we had essential workers, states couldn't afford it, cities couldn't afford it, towns couldn't afford it, counties couldn't afford it. So we came up with this rescue plan and gave them billions of dollars to keep the economy in their cities and towns and states moving. And one of the things and I fully understand it, like I said, I was raised in one of those households where when the price of a gallon of gasoline went up, it was a topic of discussion around the kitchen table. We weren't poor. We were just typical middle-class family in a 3-bedroom house with 4 kids and a grandpa. But all kidding aside, we lived fine. But it mattered. It mattered whether the price of gasoline went up. One of the things that I find is I look at, and I take it very seriously, the the confidence level of the American people in the economy, and they're so down and they're looking. There's reason to be down, but I started thinking about it. And Brian and you and I talked about it just a little bit. You know, the first year we were able to, with the rescue plan, we were able to send them a check for $8,000. I mean, a check. One, and beyond that, by the way, there's more than that. But if you're making $120,000 and you get a check for $8,000, that's a lot of money. And so it helped save a lot of people in terms of getting thrown out of their homes and rental housing and a whole range of things. But I started thinking about it, just as somebody who's raised a middle-class kid. One year, even though you didn't have the job you have now, even though you didn't get a raise that year, the difference between having a job, having a 5% raise or whatever, 3, 5, 7, whatever it happens to be, in the face of inflation, the price of the pump, although that's down every day so far, but, it's like, whoa, I feel worse off. But then again, I didn't get a check for $8,000 from the government. They just, among other things. Does that make any sense to anybody, or is it just me?
Well, it really makes a huge difference, Mr. President, because, as you said, it kept food on the table, helped people take care of their kids, especially at a time when many were out of school and it was hard to work. And the spending it generated put people back to work. And, as I mentioned, we've seen the biggest stretch of job creation that got America back to work. And we need to bring down inflation, but we need to preserve the success that plan achieved in the labor market.
I know you're all busy as the devil, especially the folks who haven't had a chance to speak yet. I'm sorry I have so many questions, but I have great respect for your collective judgment here. Brian, I'm yielding to you. I'm going to shush up.